Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with practical tips to boost your marketing efforts? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jem Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Now, lately, and maybe for a number of years, not a new thing, but more and more companies are really investing a lot more time and resource into founder content, and for good reason. As brand pages are losing their reach on LinkedIn or their engagement, putting people front and center is becoming one of the most effective ways to build pipeline, attract talent, and win trust. So why isn't every founder doing this? There are many reasons why, from not knowing what to say to worrying it'll come off as self-promotional, but the one we hear over and over again is lack of time. My guest today, Josh Kahns, founder and CEO of Notice Media, an agency that builds ROI-focused LinkedIn content for founders and executives. Today, Josh is breaking down what makes founder content work, the biggest mistake companies make when trying to give their leadership a voice on LinkedIn, and how founders can streamline the entire process so it's not just another thing on their plate. I know that everyone is going to be really excited to hear these tips, so welcome to the show, Josh.
Jen, first and foremost, thank you a ton for having me on the show. Really excited to share what I hope is helpful, maybe somewhat inspiring, and ultimately just interesting takes around the kind of thing that blew up over the past few years, LinkedIn. So excited to be here and excited to have this discussion.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you. And this is a topic that I think a lot of founders and just executives, even non-founders, struggle with. Everyone wants to have a voice. They know they need to. A lot of people see the value in others doing it, but it seems like a big hill to climb. So hopefully we can break it down into bite-sized chunks for everyone and make it easy to get started.
Definitely. Let's do it.
Awesome. Can we start just at the basics? Walk us through what executive or founder content is and why right now specifically it's such an important growth lever for a business.
Definitely. I think that the best way to articulate this would be to describe how we first ended up working with our longest tenured client, and then ultimately what that means. If I could kind of draw this circumstance and this scenario to what it means to absolutely crush founder-led brand and the importance behind it. So 6 months before I graduated from university, this was about 3.5 years ago, I came across this company that was just posting on LinkedIn, and they lived down the street from me. The four founders lived down the street, and I ended up long story short, through one of the posts that I saw from one of the co-founders, I ended up putting together a seed funding round into their company solely because I started seeing the founders post on LinkedIn. So that kind of told me something. It said, you know what, if they could get this seed stage investment, which took them now to a venture-backed company, they're a late Series A stage company right now. They're doing quite well. But if they could get this first investment from some LinkedIn posts that I came across, I wonder what I could get if I start posting every day. And again, this was a naive, inexperienced 18, 19-year-old who didn't have, like, I was most definitely not an executive. I did not have a job. I was just coming off like the tail end of my university experience, graduating in a few months from then. So I started posting every day, and that was it. I didn't really have much to tell. Again, I was not some shiny executive or I wasn't part of this rocket ship company. And I was posting thoughts, anecdotes, and through that, I was building these conversations and some interesting connections. And then just after I graduated, this gentleman in our community has been running this company for 23 years now. Really interesting company, but I'll keep it somewhat anonymous for the sake of sharing the story. And he comes up to me and says, "Josh, I noticed you've been posting on LinkedIn like pretty much almost every day for the past 6 months. Why?" I said, you know what, to be honest, I saw the results firsthand. It was, one of those very specific results. And by now I could kind of name 100 stories of byproducts and results of just posting on LinkedIn every single day or somewhat frequently. And I said, you know what, I think LinkedIn could be effective for your company, I told him. And I said, how have you been able to drum up business thus far for your business? And he goes, Josh, I've been in business for about 20 years now. I go to 5 or 6 trade shows a year. Every trade show, I know my position. I go up, I meet my contacts in person, I shake their hand, and every one of those handshakes are worth in the range of 6 to 7 figures a year. And that's how I've been able to drum up my business. Of course, we have our email marketing, and we run a little bit of ads here and there. But I haven't really thought about LinkedIn. So I told him, I said, well, consider something like this. You go to these trade shows to build trust. You go and shake people's hands. That connection, that relationship building happens in person. What happens if you could do that times like 100? And then he kind of had this confused look in his face. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, imagine if you could tell all those stories, those cumulative stories and experiences from 20 years going to these different trade shows and meeting people in person at different events. Imagine if you could just recall those stories and tell them every single day to a growing audience on LinkedIn. And from there, we began working together. It's been over 2.5 years. And if I could sum all that up and answer your question more directly, it would be LinkedIn is a place to build trust at scale, which is something that I often like to repeat. What does trust at scale mean? And you allude to this perfectly. Trust at scale means you're having those handshakes that you would be behind closed door in conference rooms at trade shows, but you're having them one to many for the sake of, as you said, attracting potential investors, prospective clients, teammates. It's a really great recruiting tool, obviously, by sharing more about what you do or about your company, how you think about specific things. So I think the best way to describe executive content or content as a whole on LinkedIn would be a great place to build trust at scale.
I love that. And that kind of drawing that parallel between what you would do in person at a conference or an event or just meeting people out in the world and doing that at scale. I think we saw that too when COVID hit and we stopped going to conferences for a period of time, this acceleration of connection on LinkedIn. And then fast forward, going back out into the world and being in person again, there was so much of like, oh my gosh, I know you only from LinkedIn. I know you only from this social network, this digital space that we it just accelerated so significantly during that time where we couldn't be out of the house. And once we went back into the world, you saw how it did exactly what you said. It built trust at scale and made you feel like you really knew people because you were following them on LinkedIn and interacting with their content and building that sort of digital relationship. It does translate back into the real world, even maybe when we weren't sure it was going to for a time.
That's 100% accurate. An interesting thing here is every single one of our teammates, we're a remote international team. We're headquartered here in Montreal, Quebec, though we have some of our teammates in Colorado, in New York, some in Montreal as well, in India, around the world, international. And what's really interesting is that each one of our teammates came through someone who's been following my content or who I reached out to. We had that rapport, or someone who's been reading my content, who refers, perhaps shares my content with their friend, and the friend was intrigued, and we ended up speaking and began working together. But my personal case study is just exactly that. Like, you feel like you have this embedded built-in sense of trust that you have with people. And again, that manifested for us very clearly with our teammates, of course. Again, like it's a totally different discussion. Like, we feel like we've known each other for many, many, many years. Although, despite having worked with some teammates for not even 6 months, we feel like we've known each other for dare I say, a decade.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And so, I think from what I see out in the marketplace, there isn't really a lot of question as to whether or not this is valuable to have a voice on LinkedIn. And, I think people really do see the importance of it, but still founders and executives struggle to do it. A lot of founders are trying to post, they don't see the results right away, so they burn out before it ever pays off. I guess, like, what are some of the big mistakes you see people making early on that lead to that burnout and make people walk away from that creating that individual content altogether?
It's a great question. I feel like the best way to describe it is kind of multifaceted. So there's two kind of directions that I like to take it in this response. But I'd say number one is fundamentally understanding that this is a long-term play. It's a long-term initiative, right? So if you were to run a campaign on Meta ads or Google ads, you have a very insightful, beautiful, accurate dashboard as to every dollar you put in, it will return your return on ad spend. It would show you very clearly how much every dollar is worth, how much every dollar generates, or lack thereof, I guess. For LinkedIn, it's a little bit more vague, where if you were to invest in a content partner, or if there is a dollar amount of correlated to the time that a founder would take writing their own content, there's the opportunity cost. So step number one is it's very important to understand that this takes time. Again, whether you do it yourself, it will take longer. Whether you work with a content partner, it most definitely requires a time investment and also a long-term horizon scope. This is not the type of initiative where you could kind of give it 30 days and then see on a dashboard what happens from there. You could definitely see signals. But even then, we like to tie signals down to 3-month experiments. So I would say that would be like the main blocker is like the time investment. Like, yes, it most definitely takes time, and then also comes down to the fact that I had to learn kind of how to tier a founder's day from my personal experiences. About a year and a half in, after writing as a freelancer and then kind of deciding that we need to kind of transition into an agency, I was kind of stuck. I wasn't exactly sure where to hire. I wasn't sure what part of my day I should be delegating as an agency owner. So I had a few conversations with some really awesome clients and friends and people that we were partnered and work with who are in different areas of business. And I got to ask them for advice. And they said every founder and every CEO, every leader, really everyone, but for this example particularly, every executive should be able to like tier their day into 3. Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 are things that only they could do. Tier 2 are activities and parts of their day that anyone who's like highly, I like to say trained or have that deep expertise could do. And Tier 3 would be things that really anyone could do. You could outsource it and it's not really specific to that individual. And for founders, and a lot of that has to do with how they kind of like pie chart their day, right? So obviously Tier 3 are things that they could kind of delegate. So I think that perhaps a mistake here is that marketing, it could be perceived as something that could be delegated, but also understanding that tying into the fact that this is coming directly from an executive's profile. So there's kind of that balance to it. But I say ultimately, it most definitely is a time commitment. It takes a lot of time, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're working with a content partner, and it is a long-term horizon initiative, which you're not able to necessarily see every dollar in, every dollar out per se.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because you mentioned like return on ad spend, that's very like quantifiable and easy to measure. What are some of the metrics that you're looking at, shorter term signals in those earlier experiments? And what are some of the ones that are sort of success indicators long term? What are the metrics that really matter for a founder led LinkedIn initiative?
So it's a great question. And then we kind of look at it from 2 buckets. What's most important and the North Star to us is the tangible success metrics. And then there's the surface level metrics. So I guess I'll cover the surface level metrics. The surface level metrics are the metrics that you could open up your LinkedIn dashboard and we'd be able to kind of identify and read together. That is all the analytics that LinkedIn gives you. Those are I would say maybe shorter term signals. You want to ensure that there's an uptick in impressions, in followers, in likes, all the impressions that LinkedIn would give you, all the metrics and statistics that LinkedIn would give you. That would be surface level metrics. Whereas the metrics that really matter, I would say at the end of 3 or 6 months, whatever the initial kind of experimentation period would kind of tip off here, is identifying the more tangible metrics, which is, I guess it's quite subjective, but if you're looking, for recruiting, how much did this whole LinkedIn initiative alleviate that pain point? If you're, which is most of the case, if you're looking to attract prospective clients and book demos and book calls, then how many calls are you able to book? Or how much has your outbound acceptance and reply rate increased by virtue of posting content on a frequent basis, because there's that level of trust? So super short to sum that up, because I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. I think there are two buckets: surface level and then the tangibles. Surface level is just something that you're able to pull up your dashboard and kind of see. But at the end of your 3 or 6 month initiative, again, whether you're writing content on your own or whether you're working with a content partner, you want to have a tangible uptick in ROI based activities. Again, whether it be hiring, client conversations, book demos, and so on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You really do have to be able to tie the efforts to the end goal. And like you were saying, not everybody, but people might have different goals when they're setting out to do this. So if your goal is more on building HR, building culture, and sort of from an HR and hiring perspective, you're going to be looking at different success versus new client acquisition and that sort of thing. But I love that, those kind of surface level LinkedIn metrics are not the end all be all. That is not, kind of saying, hey, we grew our followers from this number to this number, is not that's the signal. That's not the kind of end metric. So really connecting that dot to the business objective is so critical, like it is for anything. But I think especially for, investing that time in something that it doesn't feel like there's always a direct connection to that business metric. Like when you're doing it, I'm posting my thoughts and opinions on LinkedIn today. How is that going to get me more revenue? Right.
That's exactly it. And then just to kind of draw a point here as well, another one of our longer tenured clients, we've been working with them for over a year and a half. And if I were to, which I will not due to confidentiality, if I were to pull up their profile, you would take a look at the content, great. But when you take a look at the analytics, the impressions are not necessarily astronomical. They will not necessarily blow you away. The likes and the comments, there's a diverse set of people who fit the ICP, who engage, but each one of these people could potentially represent 6, 7 plus figures in business. So when we kind of talk about that, it was a discussion that we had in the first 6 months of working together, comparing likes to their peers, and then kind of asking about that. But once they've been able to see the early success of having one person engage with your post after 6 months of posting, you have not engaged with that person since you met them 3.5 years ago at a trade show. They're a senior buyer, a senior director of exactly the department that you want to get into at a Fortune 100 company. You end up sparking a conversation because of that post that you posted in the 6th month that got 11 likes. Then it kind of rotates the conversation and perspective from, all right, I'm just going to get at the reps. And again, there's like outsized returns on just publishing really good content for a long duration of time.
For sure. I think the profile of your ideal customer or ideal audience doesn't have to be customer if that's not your goal, but let's assume your ideal customer is so important to think about, because you're not, again, going back to the comparison with ads, you are targeting a really specific group when you set up your ad program. Organic content is available to anyone. So you can't limit your content to just be shown to the right people. So all of those metrics you were talking about, the surface level, LinkedIn metrics, that could be, you could be getting a ton of engagement from the wrong people. And then you're looking at a metric that doesn't actually help you get to that revenue goal. Or like the flip side, you get that one like from that person that you've been like dying to meet with. And all of a sudden you cracked a little bit of a window open there. And that can be way more valuable than getting thousands of views and likes from, again, the wrong people, from your competitors or from people who are looking for a job, if that's not your end goal, right? So thinking about the profile of your ideal audience is so critical there as well. And maybe that works its way into the measurement of how successful the campaigns are. I shouldn't say campaigns, the efforts, really.
That's exactly what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, some sort of how to get started, I guess. What separates, in your experience, what separates the founder content that performs well with the content that might fall flat, from what you've seen?
So I think to maybe take a step back, it's really something I want to emphasize. Everyone has content. Everyone has a treasure chest of content that they've probably haven't unlocked and opened in 5, 10, 20, in some cases even 30 years plus. So that's first and foremost. When we first engage with anyone, whether they be an executive, a C-suite level, a VP, even IC, manager, middle manager, and so on, we like to put emphasis on the fact that we want to ask questions that they haven't been asked before. We want to uncover and unlock information and stories that they've yet to be asked that in 5 years, 10 years plus. So I think that's step number one. Number two, what makes content perform? I think it's originality. I think that's really what it comes down to. There are many kind of strings that I could pull to give a response here and kind of juggle all over the place a few different aspects of a proper response. I think ultimately comes down to originality. What you want to do, again, in building trust at scale is you want to just deliver value on a consistent basis. You must have, everyone listening to this must have heard that 100 times. And Jen, you're probably rolling your eyes hearing that I said that you just have to deliver value on a consistent basis. But the beauty is that value is subjective. Value does not have a kind of like one size fits all definition to it. Value could be telling a story from your childhood that happens to resonate with someone on your feed who's scrolling LinkedIn. Value could be dissecting a playbook that is proprietary to your workflow and to your potential clients. And you said, you know what? I have this workflow that's super proprietary that works really well for us. I'm just going to share it to the public. That's my personal best performing posts are the ones where I completely break down what worked for a client, give a full case study, not from the perspective of here are the results we generated for the client, more so from the perspective of here's exactly what we did from A to Z, not borrowing anything from this and not gatekeeping to generate, these results, which are a byproduct of all these steps that we took. So I think it comes down to originality. Originality means, delivering value. Value is subjective. And when I say value is subjective, it means, again, it could be an emotional story from your childhood, which could resonate with someone on a deeper level. It could be dissecting a framework. It could be sharing a team huddle that you had today that was quite difficult. Perhaps you're battling a hardship as a team and you think it would be a good opportunity, vulnerable opportunity, and valuable opportunity to take that internal huddle and just summarize and share it as a post in public, because ultimately that is valuable. And then just to kind of sum it all up, if we're going to go back to the point of like building trust, how you do that is if you look at a graph, you have your y-axis, which is the amount of trust that you're building over time, and then your x-axis being the horizontal line, just the amount of value that you provide over time. It's just linear. The more value you provide unconditionally over time, the more trust you'll build. So ultimately what it comes down to, and the buckets that we like to share for each one of our clients, and this is quite repeatable, is that's manifested by sharing personal themed content, company themed content, and industry themed content. And by doing that, we're able to give readers a 360 view and perspective as to who the individual is and their story, how they're building their company and who their company is from a deeper, meaning and level, and how they think about their industry. And again, by doing that, you're building a 360 view into the person, into their company, and into how they view their industry. So that, again, I didn't want to go off on a tangent, but I guess that is how I would sum up what is the best content and what the best performing content looks like today. It would be pulling on those three strings, being original, and then just sharing a ton of value over time.
I'll say you'll never see me roll my eyes at adding value. That is, I think, the most important thing in any type of content, whether it's brand content, personal content, social, blog, whatever. I think value add, our email campaigns, like that is the North Star, is to add value. And I think what you're right, that value is subjective. So what's valuable to me is different from what's valuable to you. But if you're thinking about creating content and you want to make sure that you're adding value to someone at some point, I think about it as generosity. Like you're describing, we're sharing our process, every step, every little bit of how we did it. We're not gatekeeping anything. That to me is generosity. That's going to add value. And being vulnerable is generous, being, authentic. I think when we see this a lot. You go on to ChatGPT or Claude and you say, write me a LinkedIn post about this topic. That is not authentic. It's not original. It's not generous. It's just kind of spitting back into the digital universe things that are already there. So I love the approach of thinking about adding value. And for me, that means, just giving freely of what is in your mind or in your experience. And it will be valuable to someone. And not everything is valuable, right? And that's okay. That's the other thing I think about, when sometimes there's posts that fall flat. And sometimes the thing you did not expect was going to takes off. And sometimes it's hard to predict which of those two buckets you're going to be in.
I want to put emphasis on two things here. Number one, I've yet to hear the generosity point, and that is like a perfect point. And I just made a note here. I would love, with your permission, to write a post on that for my profile, just talking about. Yeah, I've never heard that, and it makes perfect sense, and that is exactly how I would describe it. And I think you did a better job than I did at describing, what good performing content looks like. And then also to your point there, one of our favorite questions to ask executives that we have the privilege of working with, just as we onboard them, on the first content call, on the first content interview, which is how we extract the content from them, we like to ask this specific question, which gives us a better understanding as to their timeline. And timeline is very important in someone's story, because we like to ask them like this, and I'll just ask it exactly as we would to a client. We look at your experiences as a timeline. On the far right side is where we are today, literally this conversation, myself as the CEO of Notice Media and yourself as the executive at your company. Walk us through where that far left side is. We call it your earliest point of relevance. For some executives that we work with, the earliest point of relevance could be their childhood. It could be their high school days. It could be their college days. It could be the first company that they were a part of. For some, the earliest point of relevance is just this company that they're currently working on and building today. Anything prior to that was not necessarily relevant in their storyline, in their timeline. Right. So that's also an interesting one. And it kind of goes back to what type of content is generous, right? Because generosity and value is subjective. So I guess it comes down to stretching your timeline or kind of visualizing it and understanding where that point of relevance is, and then ensuring that kind of those stories that you tell, if you do choose to tell those stories, whether it be in your personal life or your company life, to determining and understanding what exactly is relevant in this case.
Absolutely. I love that question of the earliest point of relevance. I think it's a great one for everyone to kind of take away. And you actually you started to answer a question that I had going in my mind when you were talking about the three tiers, right? The things only I can do, the things that maybe somebody on my team can do, and the things anybody can do. When I think about writing content for my LinkedIn page about my personal life, right? Personal, company, and industry, as you mentioned, like that feels like something only I can do. So, but at what you're describing and sort of like working with a thought partner even on this that can ask the right questions, like nobody's ever asked me, like, here's the timeline of like, here's where we are. What's your earliest point of reference? Like, I got a LinkedIn post right there. Like, so
Awesome.
just like having somebody to ask you those questions and to extract those stories out. I was curious your thoughts on that in terms of, you know, how you recommend somebody work on this content when it's the only, you know, founders are busy, right? So how can you focus on this and create content without taking too much of your time if it's in that tier 1 bucket of, hey, it's the thing only I can do, or if there's someone who's like, hey, I really need a thought partner on this, and how do those kind of two different paths look different for you?
Okay, I'm going to tackle this in 2 ways. And then the second thing that I'm going to tell you is something that I don't think I've kind of told anyone. It's something very new to me, and you may be shocked. How's that for a hook?
There you go.
But the first thing, a lot of executives that we work with and that we have conversations with, and even marketing directors, because we speak to a lot of marketing directors who are asking this exact question. Josh, how do you and your team tackle the fact that, you know, you're not us? You know, in some instances, we've been in our industry longer than you've been alive. I'm 23 years old. So in some cases, we're fortunate to work with really, really amazing, seasoned executives who've been in their particular field for longer than I've been alive, bluntly. And the question is, how do you tackle that? So I think it's all in the framing, the approach, and this kind of goes to working with a content partner. You have to understand that the content partner's job is not to come up on their own with novel pieces of content for you. That is not their job. Their job, if they are to be working with you for LinkedIn content, is to help you shape and frame your mind and thinking. Grab those stories from 10 years back, from 20 years back, pull them out, make sure they're poking you in the right uncomfortable ways so that they get the content enough for them to take back to their station, mold the clay, you know, use whatever machinery they'd like to make the perfect piece of pottery. So that really is how to work with a content partner and kind of battling the question of, isn't this inauthentic? The whole goal of personal branding and LinkedIn is to be authentic, but isn't it kind of ironic in a way that it's inauthentic if you're going to have a content partner help you with your content? I think for us, and again, like the best way that we address that is the fact that we're not the ones thinking. We are the ones shaping. You do the thinking, we do the shaping. And that goes with any content partner. They should be the ones who come to you and, again, poke you in uncomfortable ways so that you tell stories that no one's ever heard of, because the more novel, the more original they are, which will make for the better content. And then back to kind of the hook that I had given you to your response to this question. I recently, it's been about a month, after 3.5 years, every single day of writing content on my own, took on a content partner. I began collaborating with a team member of mine, and we have a great system. And I'm totally happy to share that system because I think it's interesting. And this kind of goes back into how to create a system that works in producing really thoughtful, high quality LinkedIn content. So to get to that and to address that super quickly, and we could go deeper on this, but just to give a high level understanding, again, I've been writing my own content. It's quite logical. I have some time and I speak to a lot of people, and I'm kind of I have like that muscle memory, I guess, or I put in those reps to help me kind of think in LinkedIn content terms. So when a conversation happens, I kind of like back my mind, I have a trigger that goes off that says, that's a great LinkedIn post. There's the hook, there's the body, and there's the CTA, or there's the ending, there's the wrap up. But what also comes with writing a lot of pieces of content is the fact that you may overthink it. You're watching too many trends. You're seeing a post that you thought would absolutely crush it, not absolutely crush it, and a post that you didn't think would absolutely crush it, right? So myself personally, I was kind of battling with that, and I had to, came to a point where I said, you know what, let me start dog fooding our own product. Let me start trying out my own product. And it's been a fantastic experience. What we do is I have a designated Slack channel with myself, my teammates, and we have routine bi-weekly 30-minute calls where they come prepared with questions, conversation points based on their own research. And based on the transcripts that we have from our calls, we have a Claude bot, I believe it's what it's called, or an agent that just does its research and surfaces more questions and takes a transcript and suggests follow-on questions for our next conversation, which is another thing that we do, which we could talk about. And in addition to that, I have a Slack channel and I just send voice notes. My voice note could be 30 seconds. It could be 5 minutes long. And I could be driving, I could be thinking, I could wake up in the middle of the night. We have a similar flow with our clients. I could riff off in a 4-minute voice note. And then, I guess my account manager, the team that I'm collaborating with, I leave it up to them to determine whether it's a strong post in that voice note that I sent or whether they need more from me to where they would poke me. They would say, Josh, yeah, good point, but I really want to stress this because I think this is actually a good angle to talk about. Or, you know what, that post wasn't proprietary. Like it's not original enough. It's not novel enough. Let's leave it out. Thanks for sending it, but let's not leave it out. So, or let's leave it out. So breaking news. Yes, I for the past month or so, I've been collaborating with a writer on our team who helps me write my content. She does a fantastic job. I give her all the credit. And we have a really great system, which I think could be replicable among anyone who's quite busy and, wants to test the waters, dip their toes into working with a content partner, what it could look like.
Mm-hmm. Listeners of the show will know that I'm a big fan of the voice note. I record voice notes almost before every piece of writing that I do for myself, right? I can write on behalf of other people a lot more easily, but it's not my first, I'm not sitting at the laptop and just writing. I'm a much better verbal processor of my thoughts and experiences. But taking the dog for a walk, talking into my AirPods to myself for 10 minutes, that is the best way for me to get that stuff out. And then, I will then write from there. But I think it's a great way to, like what you were saying, you're doing all the thinking and then leverage a partner to help with the shaping or leverage an AI tool like a Claude to help do the shaping. I think as long as it has really unique and authentic source content, then it's a great use of AI tools to be able to feed in your own unique perspective in, as opposed to the opposite, which we talked about earlier of just write me a social post on this topic. That's not going to be authentic. But I think what you're doing and that system that you've built is exactly that. It's create a path to put that source content somewhere and then leverage the support. That's the thing that, if I think back to the tiers that you described, tier 1, the thing that only I can do is tell my stories. But if someone else can help me shape them into something else, then that's something that can be delegated.
I want to bring up here as well. I actually did an experiment before I decided to, collaborate with this teammate to help me write my content. I said, I have all the context in the world. I have hundreds of posts and I have many, many thoughts, and I could just upload everything into Claude, create a new project and say, all right, this is my content. Here are a few bullet points, or not a few. Here's a whole 10-minute voice note to how I think and how I think, my content principles, how I want every post to be and my mix. And great. The first post, fantastic. Second post, fantastic. But, it kind of gets dull, and it still requires a lot of time for myself to go in and make the edits. And you know what? At the end of the day, I'm speaking to a mirror. I'm going back and forth with a machine who lacks that judgment. So the biggest difference obviously, aside from the fact that this is a human writing it and it does not sound like AI, obviously, but I think not the biggest, but a really, really large difference in working with an AI agent partner versus a human partner, among many other differences and advantages, is the fact that I have someone on the other end of the screen who says, you know what, Josh, that's not strong. You thought it was a strong post. It's not. Which is really healthy and really good. And I encourage them, push back. I could share an idea and and I feel on top of the world. I think it's a great novel idea, and they could come back to me and say, you know what, Josh, that's not as strong as you think it is. Here's how we can make it stronger. Why don't you kind of draw it back to this point and to that point? Because you could tell I like to digress a little bit. I like to venture out into different ideas, all under hopefully one umbrella. But it is really, really valuable to have someone who could say, here, I'm going to point it back to here, but I'm missing that context from you, where that is most definitely not something that you get when you're speaking to Amir.
Yeah, totally. So much benefit in having someone, especially someone who knows you and knows your brand and knows what you've said before, what you want to be saying, like what you want to be known for, to be able to push back in that way and help guide in that right direction. I love that. I am curious about some of the content that you're creating and some recommendations that you have around the types of content. So we love a story, we love a narrative, but not everything is that interesting or exciting, right? There's a ton of stuff we have to talk about on LinkedIn, or we should be talking about, like routine, milestones or hirings or things like that, announcements. How do you make that really interesting and squeeze real story out of those really like necessary, but maybe not as thrilling content pieces or posts that you, as some others that you could be doing? Could you walk us through that a little bit?
I love this question. This is probably my favorite question. So I love this question because you just pointed out a few examples of the most interesting sources for stories that we have access to. A hiring post, right? Congratulations. We just promoted one of our account executives to a VP of sales. We just hired a founding engineer, or funding. We'll get to the funding because that's also an interesting one. But when it comes to hiring, how to make it interesting is to kind of make it more three-dimensional. A lot of hiring posts are, as you described, and as most of us listeners are thinking of right now, they're quite two-dimensional. Congrats, here's a new hire, here's what's unique about them, and I'm so excited to have them on our team, onward. The post would do quite well because it's a momentous post, is what we call it, and signals momentum, it signals positivity, and people are encouraging. Fantastic. But how do you make this post really interesting? Why don't you kind of take a step back and walk us through how many interviews you had before this one, right? Maybe this was your 31st interview that you had. Another question, another post idea: what's unique about this role compared to the other ones that you've historically hired for? Another one: what is an unconventional question that you ask in your interview process that other people probably don't? And I'll just give you some examples here. We once worked with this Series B prop tech company. I'm not going to mention where they are, but they're somewhere in the States. And I sat down with the CEO and we were having a conversation, and I asked him the question. I was like, what is something unconventional that you do? And he goes, I don't know how unconventional it is, but something that we've done from day one, they're at about 400 teammates today across a few offices, is he said, we fly every single prospective teammate down to our headquarters in redacted location. And we play either chess, checkers, backgammon, some form of board games with them just to see how they think. That's it, plain and simple. Another client that we've had the privilege of working with, their unique thing is they're headquartered on the other end of the world, and they often speak to candidates from the other end of the world. And they have to go do a 2-day or 3-day paid work trial at the headquarters across the world. It's a 24-hour multi-connecting flight. So that's super interesting. Walk us through what that experience looked like with this candidate who got the promotion or who got hired. So that's like how to make it from two-dimensional to more three-dimensional, and how to make it much more interesting, because that signals, like, it shows your intensity. It shows, just great stories that'll either attract people or perhaps repel people, which is healthy too. And then when it comes to fundraising, I think going back to the first question you had asked of what do executives perhaps do wrong when it comes to LinkedIn content, we see a lot of fundraising announcements. That is the best catapult and best base for a successful kind of like transition into posting content frequently. Congratulations, we just raised an extremely amazing multi-million dollar seed round for our technology company to XYZ. This round was led by, these investors. We're grateful for our early partners and clients with a really cool video that those posts 99 out of 100 times do extremely well because they're like, again, momentum. But what happens usually the next day or the day after or the day after? That's kind of it. Maybe a post saying, okay, we raised some money. Now we're hiring aggressively. But why don't you kind of walk us through life the past year, the past 24 months? What are the next 12 months going to look like? Better yet, what's the next month going to look like? Where's that money going to? What bets are you guys taking with that investment? And then that could be like your catapult into, again, like by doing that, you're signaling that you guys are growing. All those interesting stories and anecdotes will then attract the right attention because, again, you're hiring. So you're showing companies what you're doing with the money and the bets you're taking, the cool things that you guys are doing. So I think, again, like if I were to sum up this long-winded response, it would be taking those two-dimensional announcements, making them three-dimensional by zooming out 30,000 feet in the air, bird's eye view, and really giving the full fleshed out backstory to each one of those momentous events.
I love that. Just like adding that color that, doesn't exist if you're just like, hey, this happened. Hey, check the box. We're announcing a new hire. I love the like walking through the hiring process or the history of, this team and sort of the growth of that team, whatever it might be. It makes it a lot more engaging and interesting and something that people will certainly pay more attention to than, people love hiring and promotion posts, like in general. I think it's like one of the more highly engaged pieces of content because people want to celebrate each other. And I love that. But I love what you've described and kind of the additional stories that could go around it. I'm curious too about just like content types. Like there's so many different types of posts you can post on LinkedIn. Are you typically leaning towards like text only kind of, or like just very authentic, I'm on the train and I'm typing on LinkedIn on my phone kind of feel? Or what do you think about like video posts, posts with images and infographics or carousel content? Like what like percentage of time are you spending on more kind of just real human typing into a post versus some of the more produced content types?
Yes. So I think I gave a long-winded answer here, but for the sake of time, I'm not. And I would just say quite simply, we like to take it case by case, post by post. I think generally what we like to do is, for going back to the 3 buckets of content that we like to focus on. For the personal themed content, we like to match it obviously with an image because we think it hits harder when you're talking about a personal, anecdote, story. If you tie it back to a relevant image, that will make the post go that much further. When you're talking about, when you're sharing a company milestone, either have like an infographic, perhaps a carousel if you're doing like a monthly recap, or new hires, have a carousel with the new teammates, a few bullet points on them, maybe a template, or a team photo. That would be great. That usually works really well. And then I think video is interesting. And we would suggest video when it comes to sharing more opinionated, industry-driven takes, similar to what we're having right now, because when you're sharing an industry take, you can most definitely share text only, especially if it's more opinionated, hotter take, warmer take. The text in the post would carry the weight of the post. But if you want to make it stand out that much more, most definitely you can include a clip, again, as we're having right now, a 30-second clip, sharing the idea, explaining the idea more elaborately to complement the text. So we like to mix it up. We like to be unpredictably predictable in the sense where, like, be predictable in the sense we're going to be posting content, you're going to be including a relevant image, but unpredictable in the sense where, you're going to mix it up from time to time just to give, again, people, like, hit them from different perspective and different angles, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think it's good to mix up the different content types too. Just have like a variety of different things on your page. Because even if you had a template, let's say, of an image that you were using regularly, if that's all you see is that back to back to back, it does get stale. So a little variety is always good.
Definitely.
I'm curious now, before we wrap, we are getting towards the end of our time here, but don't feel like you have to rush through this last question. But I want to hear about, you've talked a lot about some great examples. I'd love to just hear about kind of an end-to-end transformation that you've seen in working with clients, for especially the ones you've worked with for a longer period of time. You know their stories, you know their business, and the sort of transformation that's occurred. Can you talk about changes in pipeline or hiring or credibility when a founder like really shows up on LinkedIn?
Definitely. I'll draw this back to the first executive that I'd mentioned that we have the privilege and honor of working with. So for them, again, they're in the merchandise world, and we do everything. We do everything LinkedIn related for them. We handle their outbound. We handle their inbox. We handle their commenting on other people's posts. Of course, we handle their content creation and the replies and so on. I think a really interesting one here is we've been able to properly demonstrate the thesis that I had in the beginning, going back to what I'd mentioned of like, hey, you're going to be building a trust at scale. You're going to be sharing those conversations that you would be having at trade shows, but you're going to be sharing them, to the masses. And by doing that, again, like each one of these, as I said, these handshakes would be 6, 7+ figures in annual business with large companies. And we've been able to see that, like just through LinkedIn content. There was this one prospect that they've been attempting to work with, and they've worked with on a more conservative basis, smaller basis, with this customer handling small projects for them. And what happens when this extremely large customer, fast-growing customer, had their trusted merchandise vendor for many, many years, out of the blue, not be able to fulfill an order for them on a super, super tight timeline? Well, who's top of mind? Of course, this executive, again, we have the privilege and honor of working with, who this executive from this fast-growing company engages. They engage with each other's content. They see each other at the trade shows. They have a good relationship. They kind of like give them these orders from time to time, but they're not their trusted vendor. They're not their go-to. They have a relationship with another supplier. But we've seen quite recently something happened. They got the opportunity. Of course, it only works when you're working with a great team. When we're working with a great team, so they're a great team. They were able to handle the order in due time and in a timely manner and professional manner, and they absolutely crushed the assignment. And it unlocked multi-7 figures in annual contract for several years out. So that's just an example of building trust at scale, staying top of mind, having that sales cycle that's been, almost a decade. And then all of a sudden, when something happens out of the blue, who's top of mind? The person who's been showing up on their feed every single day, 5 days a week, commenting on their posts and just showing support constantly for a year's time. So that I think that would be a really great example among many others, but just to kind of draw it back to the client that we were speaking about.
Yeah, that's such a great one, because we talk about that a lot, this concept that, at any given time, 95% of your buyers are not in the market to buy. Mm-hmm. They have another vendor that they're already using, or, there's so much benefit to building that trust and credibility when that 95% are not ready. Because then when they are, for them to think of you first, that is the gold standard. That is the dream, is that they know you and they trust you already. So in that moment that you can't predict or can't control, that you've been showing up for them for 6 months, a year, 5 years, in a way that makes them go, now's the time. I'm gonna go and talk to Josh. Finally, I've been following him long enough, and I think he knows what he's talking about. Like, I love that example.
Definitely. And just one more super quick example with ourselves and our business. Yeah. Could have been 2.5 years ago. We were speaking to this really awesome team, and they were evaluating some content helpers. We were one of the 2 or 3, and totally cool. They ended up working with another partner. Their content was quite solid. Of course, we stayed connected. I send him, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, happy 4th, just kind of staying in the loop. And, we keep conversation as such. Very, very kind of like, hope all is well. And out of the blue, I get a message. Hey, Josh, been following your content. I'm working with this vendor. I have nothing but good things to say about their team. They're amazing people. I'm just not quite satisfied with the results that I'm seeing. Would you be able and willing to have a conversation with me just to kind of walk through everything that's going on and maybe provide some suggestions, if that's cool? No problem at all. Let's do it. Yeah. We had a conversation that day.
Yeah.
We had a conversation that day. It was a great conversation. I said, hey, take these suggestions. Feel free to take them back to the team. Like, whatever works best for you. And happens to be like, that was it. I didn't hear back from them for, could have been a couple quarters, like 4 to 6 months. And then I heard back again, another kind of out of the blue. Hey, Josh, hope all is well. We're prepared to begin engagement, working together. Let's rock it. So
yeah,
many of such cases, and grateful for the trust. But it's just staying top of mind. It's another one of those really valuable touch points.
Totally. And a lot of people view those sort of out of the blue outreaches as like, we can't attribute that to anything marketing, or we can't attribute that to any activity, but it's that long-term build of trust, which is what you talked about. Trust is scale from the beginning that really helps to make those things possible.
That's exactly. I know we're approach time, but I noted down one thing that I wanted to share to the audience.
Go for it.
I think that there's this misconception that LinkedIn belongs to executives. LinkedIn belongs to CEOs. It belongs to executives sharing milestones and interesting things about their company. From what I've seen, actually, like the best content is actually, like in our experience, like our best case study is probably not even for a CEO. There's this really interesting company, again, redacted location, but they were super heavy on LinkedIn. They had about 50 teammates. They said, of our 50 teammates, we want half of which to post on LinkedIn. And they came up with this crazy incentive system to incentivize their teammates to post, in addition to working with content partners like us to power some of their team's content. The interesting thing was that we were actually working with some account executives. We were working with software engineers. And this was really cool because it wasn't necessarily the CTO or the CEO or the CMO or the COO. And what you see in these conversations these are the people who are dialing the cold calls. These are the people who are showing up to offices making the first pitch. Imagine how great those stories are, right? And oftentimes, like, we get those stories from the CEOs as well because they're so fantastic. But you're speaking to the people on the front lines every single day in a growing company, right? So again, LinkedIn does not belong to executives. It does not belong to CEOs. If you're an SDR, if you're an AE, if you're a software engineer, if you are a customer success person, I think customer success and support have the best kind of pipeline for content. There's so much to share, obviously. They are literally the people on the front lines. It's yours. Whoever has a great story to tell, which is literally everyone, there's irony there, it's yours. Like, LinkedIn is totally yours. If you have something to share, it's just on you to roll it out. It'll unlock great opportunities. You're an AE at a company and you're sharing some of your experiences, it can unlock a VP sales or a CRO role and so on. That's just the nature of sharing how you think and who you are.
I love that. And I think that's such a great place to leave it. That's such let's leave it there. LinkedIn is not just for executives. So I hope to hear everybody's stories that's been listening in today, that you've been inspired and have some tools now to start posting on LinkedIn. So Josh, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Thank you for your generosity.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for providing the platform to share some of my thoughts. And I'm very passionate about this, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with any of the listeners. Was any questions whatsoever? My LinkedIn is wide open, and I'd be more than happy anytime to help out wherever I can, wherever applicable. Hopefully I can. And again, Jen, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure that you are following Josh on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more